In this lecture, I'm going to show you how to set up a queue. Now, queues are similar to stacks. If you've seen the video that I did on stacks, I had mentioned that stacks follow a LIFO principle, or last in, first out. So if you look at this diagram here, you can imagine this is a container, and we're pushing in a node, the first node, which is the 1, and then 1 ends up at the bottom of the stack. Now if we end up pushing another node, well, that 2 will end up on top. Now when it comes to retrieving the data, well, as I mentioned, it follows the last in, first out. So if we're trying to retrieve, well, it's going to grab it from the top. So that's where, so 2 is going to be retrieved before 1, because 1 was the very first item in the stack pushed. It's at the very bottom. All right. That is a stack. Now the queue is different. It follows a FIFO principle, which is first in, first out. So that's kind of like it's kind of like being in line at the grocery market when you're purchasing your groceries, right? Or some line at the bank teller, for example, like let's see here, like over here. All right, so here's the bank teller. So number 1 was first, number 2 was second, and this is third. So number 1 was first, so he should be the next one, and he should be the next one in line. And so it's first in, first out. So that is what differs between the stack and the queue. So stacks are last in, first out. Queues are first in, first out. Okay, so think of the queue as just being in line, and at any typical line you have, and that first person who was there is going to be the first one who's going to be helped. Okay, so that's how they differ. So let's go ahead and work on this here. So we're going to first set up this queue. We're going to set up a node class, and we're going to set up the queue class. So let's go ahead and do that here. I'm going to start with the node. And it's going to get a constructor, which gets in a value. Do this dot value equals value. And then we're going to have a pointer. And that pointer is going to be the next. And by default, it's going to be null. All right, next we're going to create our queue class. Going to take in a constructor, which doesn't take any arguments. And we're going to give it a first property, or the first person who was in line. And by default, it's going to be null. And we're going to do a last. You can imagine the last person in line who got into the line. And by default, it's null. And then we're going to keep track of the length of this line. And it's, to start off with, is going to be 0. Okay. All right. So that's for the queue, and that's it. Let's go ahead. I'm just going to set this up and instantiate a queue. Do new queue, just like so. And if I run this code here, and I check, let's see here, check what's the queue. We can expand this queue here, and we see we have our default basic setup. The first is null, last is null, and the length is 0. All right, so this is our basic setup for our queue.